Hello, my name is Diamond Benton, and my contribution presentation is going to be on Dorothy Height. Focusing on her childhood, Dorothy Irene Height was born on March 24th, 1912 in Richmond, Virginia. Her father, James Height, worked as a building contractor, while her mother, Fanny Height, was a nurse. Dorothy Height eventually left Richmond, Virginia, and moved with her family to Rankin, Pennsylvania. At this age, she was 4, and Rankin, Pennsylvania is near Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. Moving on to her education, Height was an extremely dedicated student in school throughout her childhood and adolescent years. As a result, she graduated from Rankin High School in Pennsylvania in 1929. Along with her exceptional skills in school, it caused her to win a $1,000 scholarship in a contest. And this scholarship enabled her to be able to enroll at New York University, where she earned a Bachelor of Science degree in education and a master's degree in educational psychology. After this, she pursued a postgraduate work at Columbia University and at the New York School of Social Work. With her profession, Height's first job was a caseworker in the New York City Welfare Department. In 1937, Height met Mary McLeod Bethune, the founder and president of the National Council of Negro Women, abbreviated as NCNW. Bethune became Height's mentor, and these two worked closely together until Bethune's death in 1955. 2 years later, in 1957, Height became the 4th president of the National Council of Negro Women. She held this position for 40 years. With Height's activism, Height began being a social and civil rights activist at the age of 25 and joined the National Council of Negro Women, as stated before. Throughout Dorothy's life, she fought for the equal rights for not only African Americans, but for women as well. In fact, in 1944, she joined the national staff of the YWCA, which is known as the Young Women's Christian Association. This organization was used to unify and empower women and promote the idea of peace. During the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, Height also organized Wednesdays in Mississippi, which brought together Black and white women from the North and South to create a dialogue of understanding. Height was an effective mediator during disputes in planning these meetings because, coming from 2 different perspectives and 2 different races, women sometimes would debate and argue and disagree on issues, but she was the mediator in these varying philosophies. Moving into the 1930s, Height was also an activist against lynching and for reforms to the criminal justice system. With social welfare, she was ahead of the council during most of the critical years of the Civil Rights Movement. She instituted a variety of social programs aimed at improving the quality of life of African Americans in the South. As mentioned before, Dorothy Height was well known for her leadership with the Young Women's Christian Association, abbreviated as YWCA. By 1946, she was elected the National Interracial Education Secretary for the YWCA, where she led the effort to integrate all of the facilities of the agency. In 1965, Height became the first director of the YWCA's Center for Racial Justice, which was a position she held until her retirement from the organization in 1977. Height is also accredited with being the first person in the movement to view the problems of equality for women and equality for African Americans as a whole, merging these issues that had been historically separate. Her focus on political mobilization was vital for African Americans and women at the time. Women were not able to engage in politics at a level with their white counterparts. Not only was this a move for African Americans, but also for women that would soon make a huge difference. With her societal influence, Height had a great impact on society by also focusing on the equal rights of education, unemployment, and voter awareness among African American women. Height worked with every major civil rights leader of the period, including Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Roy Wilkins, Whitney Young, and A. Philip Randolph. Although she was not featured as a speaker during the March on Washington in 1963, Height was one of the event's chief organizers and represented the only women's organization recognized in the march. Throughout all of her works and forms of activism, Height had the ability to personally encourage President Dwight Eisenhower to desegregate public schools and urged President Lyndon B. Johnson to appoint Black women into governmental positions. As we can see, this led to the beginning of a great change which it came to integration of race and sex in high positions within our government today. This made a big difference. Moving on to our final accomplishments. In 1944, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt honored Height with the Freedom from Want Award. Leading into the 1960s and the 1970s, Height also served on a number of important committees in the executive branch. This included the President's Committee on Employment of the Handicapped and the Presidential Commission on the Status of Women. In 1986, Height organized the first Black family reunion celebration designed to reinforce the strengths and traditions of the African American family community. Over the next 2 decades, it was not predicted that these events related to the celebration would attract over 12 million people. This was a great accomplishment. In 1989, President Ronald Reagan awarded Height with the Citizens Medal Award for Distinguished Service. And last, President George W. Bush presented Height with the Congressional Gold Medal in 1994 and with the Presidential Medal of Freedom in the year 2000. Height has a great legacy. Over the course of her lifetime, Dr. Height became well respected across the nation for her leadership in the campaign for women's employment, education, and equal rights. As society mirrors, her tireless efforts for equal rights have earned her the praise and recognition of numerous organizations. Even so, that on September 7, 2004, Dr. Height was inducted into the Democracy Hall of Fame International on the Capitol Hill campus of the National Graduate University in Washington, D.C., the Hall of Fame for Democracy. And even though Dorothy Irene Height was never married or had any children, her life was long and full of abundance. Unfortunately, Dorothy Heights died on April 20th, 2010 at Howard University Hospital in Washington, D.C. Even though Dorothy is no longer physically present, Heights will be recognized as one of the most influential women in modern civil rights movement on behalf of racial and gender equality in history. Thank you. And this was Dorothy Heights' contribution to society.